Couple things. One is 2 days ago, there was a New York Times article. It was an article talking about leadership and the importance of leadership in these times. And they were saying that great leaders understand that when so many vulnerable and scared people are so willing so quickly to put their livelihoods and even their lives in their leaders' hands and make sacrifices that's asked of them, the one thing they expect is the truth and nothing but the truth in return. And leaders who trust people with the truth are trusted more in return. And that's just an interesting point, because oftentimes when we share the truth, especially in the short run, it can be scary as hell as a leader, because you feel like they can't handle the truth, that it will make them paralyzed, collapse, just get into maybe modes of depression and collapse. Yet in the long run, the truth, when delivered correctly, is often much more powerful. But in the short run, it can be painful. And they said, whenever there is more trust in a company or in an organization, country or community, good things happen. Trust is this ingredient. It's like oxygen in the air. If there's trust within the organization, up and down, sideways, you'll find good things tend to happen. So the article also talked about this question where some of our leaders today talk as if people want only good news and optimism, and to calm their fears. And the person that was interviewed says the true antidote to fear is hope, not optimism. That hope comes from seeing your leader lead in a way that brings out the best in people by inspiring collaboration, common purpose, future possibilities. It takes hope to overcome great fear and meet great challenges. People do, of course, appreciate good news and optimism from their leaders, but only if it's grounded in reality, facts, and data. Now, we shared this quite a bit in the business world. There is a famous Navy admiral, Admiral Stockdale, that's talked about. And the people have different views of kind of, I think in the Navy, the top award is the Stockdale Award, the Jim Stockdale Award. And it has different meanings, different stories told about Admiral Stockdale, but the story in the business world that really stuck and resonated was around the Stockdale paradox. So the Stockdale paradox goes like this. So Admiral Stockdale was a admiral who led more prisoners of war out of Vietnam in the whole Vietnam War. He led more prisoners out of war to safety than any other admiral. And what ended up happening was this. There were 3 different buckets of individuals in this prisoners of war like camp. They were the optimists. And the optimists believed that by Christmas, they would be freed. So by Christmas, we'd be free, we're gonna get out. Now, as Christmas came closer, you got to December 21, 23, 24, literally every optimist died. They say out of heartbreak, right? Out of the fact that your mind and body, how connected it is, they believed they would be free. And as it became clear that they were not going to be free, every optimist perished. They literally just died. Now, some of you on the call, right? Some of you on the screen here are thinking, and that is exactly why I am not an optimist. This is why, right? I stick to my pessimism, right? This is why I believe in the worst, right? I don't want my hopes dashed. Well, here's the second part of the story. Every pessimist who believed they would never be free, would be stuck here forever, also perished shortly after. So the only advantage you're going to have over optimists, if you're a pessimist, you're going to live a few weeks longer. That's it. So those who were optimists died, those who were pessimists died. The only group that got out, and this is what's called the Stockdale paradox, were the ones who were able to balance faith with reality. Faith and optimism and belief that they will get through this. And this will be a life-defining moment, and it will be a big part of their history, their self-growth and life experience, but they're gonna make it through, and that's the faith. But it had to be balanced with the reality of how tough things are today.
Faith grounded in reality.
Faith grounded in reality, very much like the article. They're the only ways that people were able to make it through. And I felt Stockdale paradox is very apropos to what's happening today, right? And in fact, so many of us are wondering, is the country going to reopen, right? Maybe Georgia in a day, right? Or maybe not. People are like asking, is it 2 more weeks? Is it 1 more week? Is it 1 more month? And that notion of looking for that, when is this ending? When is this ending? Can put us into a very short game mindset and having heartbreak occur week after week, if not day after day. And so this notion of the Stockdale paradox, we'll go into more detail in this leadership series as well. So just really quick, I'm going to share my.
While pulling this up, I see that we have somebody from Bellevue Hospital joining us from New York City. Alma, it's awesome to have you. Bellevue is one of the hardest hit hospitals in where we are in New York. So it's good to have you. It's good to have everybody.
Okay. So you can see my screen. I'm just going to do a quick recap of some of the things that we touched on. So this is the 5th in the series we've done, right? And we have 5 of N because we believe it'll continue for quite a while. We're going to plant a seed for the next 6 months at least. So I'll tell you more about that in a sec. But this was the map we had created in one of the earlier sessions called the People System Map. Every organization is built to train people. And we train people in 1 of 2 ways. One is on technical and hard skills versus the soft skills, which is tied to leadership, which is tied to how people interact with people. They have a jumpstart component, which is all around intensity, and then there's sustainment. OJT is a military term that stands for on-the-job training. And most organizations have covered the green check boxes, but the big glaring hole that's missing is a level of structure put in place for the consistent, sustained OJT training on the leadership soft side of things. And so this phrase at the bottom, a DDO, someone building a team, an organization for this to happen deliberately versus an ADO is when it happens accidentally. Most of us in most organizations have very little training, and we use one of the first examples of running a staff meeting. None of us as leaders are trained in how to run a staff meeting. No instruction, no training, no protocol. It's just go ahead. Maybe just do a save as the last person who was your boss before you came in. So we dove in and we're spending these series going into depth on this structure of how do you set up your organization to deliberately produce higher quality leadership, higher quality individuals at every level of the company. So then the part 2, which we covered last week, was this. When it comes to people and anything people, so I'm just going to annotate on this for a second. So when it comes to anything to do with people, give me 1 second here. Character is at the heart of how you develop people. Character is at the root of how people are developed. And so when focused on getting people to grow, we spent around a decade with some of the best in understanding human behavior and character. And it came down to 2 main character traits that every human being had to find a balance against. It was confidence and humility. And within confidence and humility, because we mentioned that when those are imbalances, when bad things happen. When bad judgment, bad decisions tend to occur, it tends to be because when we're overly confident and not humble, we are arrogant, so we make a reckless decision. When we are overly humble and not confident, we are insecure. We tend to be paralyzed when we need to act. And so the imbalance in those things, and different definitions of confidence, can be courage, humility is open-mindedness. But within that set, what we found to be 2 of the most important areas to train is resiliency and toughness, otherwise in children known as risk-taking. Adults, children. So resiliency and toughness, and the way we think of that is almost an element of defense versus offense. The Vice Chief of the Navy, who we know well, defined these terms. Resiliency is the ability to take a punch. Toughness is the ability to then get up and fight. And in today's environment, no matter where you work, whether it's with your a nonprofit, whether you're in schools, whether in the military, whether in a Fortune 500 company or a startup, you need both. You need the resilience to be able to deal with the bad news and take these punches, but you also need the ability to go fight. And the reason why this is important is that think of character traits as muscles. When our muscles are not exercised, they atrophy, they get weaker. And when you have weak resiliency muscles, you tend to be fragile. As an individual, as a team, as an enterprise, you get fragile. versus when you're resilient, we can deal with the bad news and still stay standing. That's what we call defense. On the flip side, when I go to toughness or risk taking, think of this as the muscles to be able to go play offense, to be able to go fight. And what ends up happening is when the muscles are stronger as an individual, as a team, as an enterprise in being tough and risk taking, you end up increasing the options and choices in front of you. Your future starts to look better and better. You have choices and you have options that you did not have before. Versus on the flip side, when those muscles are weak, we tend to be paralyzed and you will see less fight, less choices, and we tend to sort of stay committed to the almost cruise control track we seem to be on. So we're going to cover a little bit of both on the side of resiliency, but as well as a side of toughness. And so these are the two biggest areas we find that organizations need to focus on training people: resiliency as well as toughness.
And so last week we shared some practical tips in terms of how to work from home and how to take some of the tools that we've built and how to weave it into and how to kind of use it from home now given the situation. So today we thought we're going to try to wrap it up for you in kind of a nice bow, this whole work from home protocol. So I'm going to walk you through this. Let's see. This work from home. Can you guys see this? Everybody good?
So we've been good at learning sign language. So if you can, if it's good, thumbs up, right? If you can't hear, just cup your ears.
Okay. Work from home protocol. So there's actually 6 components we're going to take you through, and I'm going to show you how the resiliency and toughness are part of this protocol, but there's actually 6 pieces. We're going to dive into a few today, and then some of them we've already actually taught you. So let me just take you through, kind of bear with me as we walk you through these different components. Let's see. So there's a daily summary, and then I'll go through and explain each one. And this is all a work from home protocol. All these components tied together when done together. Actually, my spelling is going to come out. Resiliency training, which we covered last week. And if you didn't see it, there's another class today at 3 o'clock. There's a program called Coronitas, which is all tied to gratitude. It's all around servant leadership. I'm going to take you through that. We've taught how to run staff meetings. And then today we're going to teach a little bit more about what Charlie was just talking about in toughness training. Okay. Let's see. So
now as Megan's putting this together, so she's listing these things in the theoretical sequence, right? The theoretical sequence of, in the ideal theoretical world, you would start with getting your people doing these daily summaries, moving to on my mind, notifications, resiliency training, move to gratitude, then staff meeting focus, then toughness. However, for those of you who've been with us for the last, this is the 5th series, so for the last 5 weeks, you'll notice that we didn't teach it in the order that we write it down theory-wise. And this is one of the biggest differences between theory to practice, theory to application. Oftentimes, solutions aren't good or not even applicable until you need it. I mean, the example I thought about just walking to work today was that, usually when children are born, all you do is focus on trying to get them to eat, right? Just eat, eat, eat. Most people don't think about diets, right? When someone is a little baby. But at some point, because we're overeating, now dieting and nutrition and things of that sort start to matter. But in the beginning, it's just eat. I want you to just eat more often. There's something very similar where oftentimes we've seen that solutions to problems kind of are almost inappropriate in terms of timing until the problem really is big. And so part of how we have trained was kind of based on the problems that are showing up as everyone moved, for the most part, work from home.
So we're going to show you examples. Last week, people were asking us for samples and templates of our daily summary and what we call an on my mind. But let me just give you kind of the highlights of what's included in a daily summary. And this is all tied to And what Charlie's talking about is training out micromanagement. So we're going to explain more detail, but this daily summary is literally just a simple email that every employee is drafting at the end of the day to their manager of what they worked on today, but also what they intend to get done in the week. So it starts with challenges, questions, reminders, a very simple template we're going to take you through.
I'll show you an example of one.
Yep. Then they share what they completed for the day, completed tasks, what you did. Then they share pending tasks, what they intend to get done for the week. And the key to this is it's a to-do list. Everybody has to-do lists, and it's just taking the to-do list they already have and sharing it with their manager. It's just exposing it and their team. They can copy their team on it. So it's just literally exposing what they're already doing, and it keeps them accountable to what they're doing. And this is, again, a work from home protocol. The On My Mind, if you've heard us talk about this, if you've come to our past classes, this is something we're going to take you through on what's on your mind. It's happening 3 times a week during this work from home.
So we do Monday, like usually end of day Monday, end of day Wednesday, and then either Friday or Saturday.
Just because I don't have room for Saturday, but Friday or Saturday. And then they pick 3 emotions. They're happy, they're sad, they're frustrated, they're anxious, whatever it might be. It's very quick and it's visceral. It's their intuition of how they're feeling, 3 different emotions. And why 3 is really important, because nobody's ever just one thing. I'm happy today. We're all schizo by nature. We feel excited, angry, frustrated, confused, all at the same time. So this is critical. We'll take you through kind of where this came from on my mind. And then we've walked you guys through resiliency training in this next phase. If you've come to the classes, we've talked about this. It's a 1-hour program, 1 hour per week. It's a 13-week program we've built. 13 weeks training protocol. And it's 8 to 12 people per group, per class. And it's not being led by a moderator of any kind, or in the beginning it kicks off with somebody helping to drive it, but it's literally run by the team itself. So it's 8 to 12 people in a group running this resiliency training program every week, 1 hour for 13 weeks. On the gratitude side, this Coronitas, if you've come before, you'll see we start, and this is 1 hour at the end of the week on Friday. We start with buzz. What are the good things that happened in the week? All fun stuff that happened. Then we go into what's more of this, it's really a servant leadership gratitude, which is the question is, who helped you succeed this week? Who helped you succeed this week?
It sounded like some of you were struggling to see the whiteboard. Can you see the whiteboard? Yeah, thumbs up if you can. Yes?
Okay, good.
Okay, so maybe by the way, if you can't see it, everything will be on video afterwards. We'll send you actually the screens of this as well. So you can get copies of all this too.
So there's buzz, servant leadership. We ask the question, who helped you succeed? We call it Coronitas because when we're in person together, we have the little Coronas are called Coronitas. And so when you thank somebody and it's something very small, you hand them a Corona thanking them, a Coronita. You can do whatever you want to do. And obviously virtually, you'll see how we do it with not handing out Coronitas. And then we've taken you through meetings. The key insight, I'm just kind of quickly going through so we can get to what we wanted to talk about, is around tempo. Staff meetings, tempo really matters. And in particular, how you start the meeting and how you end the meeting. Starting and ending has a disproportionate impact on anything that you do, starting the week, ending the week, start the meeting, ending the meeting is really important. Again, we've taught these things. On toughness training, the key here we're going to take you through is around 90-day increments. How human beings change and upgrade, how organizations upgrade.
And even accomplishing anything, you should think of it in accomplishments in 90-day increments.
I won a penmanship award in 4th grade and it's not coming through here, so apologies, it came out better in my head. Okay, so this is the program, the work from home protocol. There are these 4 phases. Let me just kind of label these. 1, 2, 3, 4 phases. What we've taken you through so far in our programs is resiliency training. We've taught gratitude, and we've taught staff meetings. So today we're going to,
and by the way, if you want, I mean, there's a resiliency training course, I think at either 1 and 3 o'clock, 5 o'clock, you can get like a live experience of what the gratitude is. And those are important components of training everybody.
We are going to go through today the daily summary. So phase 1 and the OMM, we're going to walk you through right now, templates. And then Charlie's going to cover a lot of this toughness training, which is this phase 4. So again, we've kind of taught you the middle, why Charlie was sharing that before, kind of the intention of why we did that. And then I just wanted to make one other point on this phase 1 here. The daily summary, and if you have these questions, we can take them, but at the end here, this is a lot of noise. If you're getting a daily summary from everybody that works for you of what they're doing, it's heavy and it's a lot of noise. It's a lot to take in. But the key in that is that if they do that every day, when you get an OMM 3 times a week, this is the signal that you need. This is the key, is the signal. But you need them to do the daily summary to be self-accountable, but you'll get signal of their mindset and where their head is. We're going to share. And then for the phase 2, again, the resiliency, what's really important here is this is the start of the week. You start on the hard work, training yourself. Development of yourself is very hard. You start at the beginning of the week, and then at the end of the week is where you get to kind of the fun stuff, the gratitude, thanking each other. So defense, we're going to cover this first. We consider all of this defense work setup.
And so
this offense.
I know there's a lot on this page, but just to add in, so what we have found was this, one of the biggest elements for managers and leaders that's missing, especially when you're now dispersed working from home, is management by walking around. Mm-hmm. Your ability to check in on your team, see how they're doing, without even them opening their mouth, but simply by walking around, just seeing how they are. And they say, if you even Google search, communication, what percentage of communication is verbal? They say 7% is verbal, which is 93% of communication between humans is nonverbal. So management by walking around, MWA, right? Management by walking around produced a tremendous amount of sense making for us as leaders on how our people are doing. Well, what's happened now that we're several weeks in to COVID, and what's happened from most organizations having a large chunk, if not all of their people working from home, what we have found is leaders and managers are spending time trying to figure out an alternative to management by walking around. We have organizations we've seen, large organizations having these, like every morning, everyone must check in and call together. At the end of the day, we must check in together. There are leaders who are spending 80 to even 90-something% of the time all day calling and video calling everyone just to see if they're okay. And if you haven't had this experience on video conference and conference calls, trying to get someone to be open and tell you what's actually on their mind and what's happening can feel like dentistry. Like it's like pulling out teeth. They just, how are you doing? Good. Everything okay? Good. Like, fine. Do you need anything? Nope. All good, sir. Or all good, ma'am. It's very difficult to even get information, but checking in with everyone. So then technologies like Zoom and other systems are being built where leaders are starting to wonder, are they even productive? Are they even working? So then there's like ways to log in the hours and how long are they logged into like Slack or email, or like you start to look for every which way. And so Megan and I spent a lot of time in the course of the week helping different organizations. This week we were working with a Navy admiral and had this discussion. And started the discussion saying that we're not playing intramural sports. All of us, we're in the business of professional sports. And I don't mean just the Cleveland Indians here, but I mean the fact that results matter, revenue matters, mission matters, winning matters. And in environments like this, when our people are all dispersed, this is very difficult to do. And the reason I mention this, but I start by talking about defense. As a leader, we often see one person who is not seemingly working very hard, maybe not even showing up to meetings, maybe putting their video off and not saying a word, and their disengagement or their not showing up, to us, it feels like an injustice. And we narrate very quickly that them not pulling the weight is having an impact on the people that are pulling their weight. So we make it almost our job and priority to get them right.
To get them productive.
To get them productive. And we quickly don't catch ourselves going into the business of administration, of making sure I'm checking in, are you doing it? And before you know it, we're micromanaging their productivity and trying to force them into productivity. And that is now the common problem showing up for a lot of leaders in many organizations.
All of this is self-driven, right?
So, what we're sharing over here, this daily summary and the OMM, this takes little to no work at all from leaders and from managers. It initiates from the employee themselves. So the daily summary, as Megan mentioned, is them basically sharing, right? It's a structured to-do list, right? You got challenges, questions, reminders because it might go up to someone you report into or the team. There's what you've completed as a task and what you're doing as a pending task. And when we first started, so we've run daily summaries for over a decade in our company. We found that the work from home protocol, it just became 10 times more important and more effective. The first versions, we found a lot of daily summaries. Completed task was I went to the staff meeting. Second bullet was I gave feedback after the staff meeting. Third bullet was I then reviewed my notes from the staff meeting. The fourth bullet was I talked to somebody else about my notes from the staff meeting. And what we found over time was people started to be accountable, saying, like, I need to get more done. And they started to write back at first what felt like a form of micromanagement. I'm now having to share what I'm getting done.
You don't trust me, right?
Right.
I mean, you don't trust me in being micromanaged.
Which was the first reaction. A lot of these things, they would say everything great is on the other side of hard. In the beginning, it didn't look like it was working, but quickly, most people talked about how self-accountability, you know, why people make to-do lists and check them off. It made people self-accountable. Now, what the OMM and why that's important, that's on my mind, is that when you get a tactical list on a daily summary happening 5 days a week, the read and OMM is a visceral reaction. I think, Chris, you're asking, you can send your daily summary, definitely supervisor, but also the team. You want people to be able to expose like what you're accomplishing, what you have left to do. A lot of people ask about how do you create asynchronous teams that can run interconnected but not dependent on each other. The way that happens is through daily summary by exposing what's happening. The on my mind is the added layer that's really important. And why Megan put signal is this. When it comes to judgment, when it comes to decisions, the research shows that our decision-making follows our emotions. When we are really frustrated is when we're gonna make an aggressive decision. When we're really scared, we're gonna make a timid or kind of a paralyzed decision. So the ability to have a pulse read on the visceral emotions people are feeling is some of the best signal you can get of what they're about to do next. And the accumulation of negative emotions leads to a certain action. An accumulation of overly positive emotions can lead to also another set of actions. And so these are the things that when put in place can be incredibly effective. Now, I'm going to give you some examples so you can maybe see kind of what this looks like. So let's see. Actually, you know what? I can keep the broadcasting. All right, so where's the photos? Okay.
Here's an example.
So here's an example, just not that far back, of a daily summary. So this is from Laura, who reports into us. You see that she has
questions and reminders to start, completed tasks and pending tasks, right? And this is just one day. And she put it to Charlie and I, and then she copied her team and the group of the team she's in.
So you can see right here. So it was addressed to myself and Megan. She has what we call a training partner, Eric, and then her team operations. So everyone there is aware. And we had said before, operating in the 21st century has turned all of us into puzzlers, meaning that there is no problem, there is no solution, that one person has all the information. And so the faster you can put your puzzle pieces on the table, and oftentimes you say, well, that's my business, you don't need to know. It's hard to predict what others need to know and not know. You want to build an organization, this whole notion of trust. The default is to inform people with information, because you never know what puzzle piece you have and how that will inform someone else to make the right calls or to get a better view of what the situation is. Then when you take a look, right, as Megan mentioned, the questions and reminders, right here, Then you have
completed
sorry,
tasks.
maybe
Yeah,
it'll be easier to
maybe
look at
smaller,
this.
but yeah. And if you notice the title, daily summary. So we literally are created the template to make it very simple. So as a leader, you can see what's coming in, daily summary from, and then on the date. So if you can easily see it coming in the email.
Now the hardest thing that's going to happen for all of us is going to be to not
respond.
I know this is going to sound very counterintuitive. This is going to be the hardest thing. Said another way, do not be a micromanager.
Yeah. This is the idea of training out the micromanagement. It's very hard to do when you're receiving maybe 10s or 20s of these emails to not respond to every single one. Because for one, it's painful to do that, but we find ourselves doing that because we kind of want to alleviate some pain that they have or a question that they have. And it actually can feel good. I'm going to check that off my list, check that off, help that person get that little thing done. But to actually stay away from it, just read it, quickly scan it, but you're not responding, at least for the first 3.
And so the ability to ask everyone on a template, and one of the things you'll see, by the way, even over here, the subject line matters, right? Daily summary from Laura, the date, very easy to pick up in your inbox, right? Always has the exact same subject line, the 3 different parts, you can glance really quick, but the key is this, we need to train the micromanagement out of us. It's no different than parenting, right? Helicopter parenting and doing everything for your kids. This is a very hard thing to do. In fact, it is so ritualized and so part of us. You will see how hard it is. And so the one ask I have for you is this, as you go through this exercise, right? 3 times, for the first 3 you get, do not respond. I want you to hold, I want you to be silent, I want you to just read and do not respond. Do not do a got it, acknowledge, correct, because it is so ingrained in us that when someone who works for us gives us an email, gives us a comment, a quote, we must adjust and correct everything. And this is not for the manager. This is for the individual to start to build a good habit, a ritual, right, of sharing their daily summary 5 days a week and then writing the OMM 3 times a week. So
we can get to the next. Somebody actually did ask as we moved to the OMM, what do we do if somebody refuses to do this daily summary? So we have a 3-strike policy on this. This is not optional. It's part of the work from home. If you're working from home, you're sending a daily summary. And if you don't do it we'll give you a warning in the first one we see not come through, or to the second one. By the 3rd one, we're saying we reserve the right, as every organization does, despite having a no fire policy, we have the right to terminate you. We're that serious about it. In particular, because it impacts the senior leaders, especially even junior leaders, the ones who are trying to kill it, who are working so hard to move the business forward. It impacts those people. It impacts their ability to get their job done because they're so frustrated of other people not working hard. So there's no option whatsoever.
So moving from the daily summary to the OMM, and so this is for a different person, Shrelon. Here's an example where she talks about here at the top here, the feelings. And this comes off an app, but literally we did it with email first. So you can do this exact thing over email. There are benefits that sometimes tech can have, but literally you can do the whole thing over email. She sends it to a small group. So in this case, it is a group right here. Myself and Megan are on there, as well as Tom, my head of engineering, her training partner, Nyan, and Greg as well. 3 emotions she's feeling. So this was 4/11, so a couple weeks ago. I am challenged, I am worried, and I'm anxious. And literally all you're doing is just then free form describing why you feel that way. And oftentimes what will happen is, in this case, these are 3 negative emotions, but we will have a mixture of emotions, right? We will tend to have so it's the red or green emotions. You will have people who actually feel excited, but I'm worried, right? And frustrated. And why 3 is that it shows you which way you're leaning. 2 creates 50-50. 1 is not accurate enough. 3 over time starts to give you a trend of, are you more positive? Are you more negative? And then the key, this is easier to read. Daily summaries get written, especially when it's going to someone else, no different than your performance evaluation. Performance evaluations is an application to get promoted, to get paid more. So as a result of it, the writing in it is written to try to make yourself look good, right? My development is that I care too much and I work too hard and I can't seem to disengage from work, right? Like my strength is, so it's written with a certain mindset and a point of view. The OMM, once you get your tactical list out, tends to be free-form writing. But the part here I highlighted that's important is this. So this is looking at this now from reading what Srilana wrote over here. Not fully sure, but I worry they aren't excited and enjoying it. Rather stressed and overwhelmed, which leads to negativity versus innovation. She is reading OMMs coming up from her top engineers. And a pulse read she had was that. And when that happens, this is where bad things start to happen from both sides. This is where now you can find leaders start to over coddle, right? Start to now spend all their time trying to make the work exciting, as opposed to some things just aren't exciting, but you need to be able to still motivate people. You have individual engineers who start to then, stop working hard. And we say that work can very quickly turn into salt mine work. It can feel like every day I'm going into the salt mines and I'm just hating my work and I'm hating my work. And an accumulation of that over many weeks leads to very bad things on all sides. The manager starts to get more and more frustrated. The individual reporting to them gets more and more frustrated. Neither side gets what they want in the process.
And the key in this, I think somebody asked why this isn't done verbally. I mean, people talk all the time, but what we're finding is that it's very hard, especially when you have what is considered a negative emotion. And Charlie's going to show you where this came from. When you have a negative emotion, I'm angry or I'm sad, generally speaking, people say, gotta fix that. And that's a problem, right? Like you're a problem. So kind of where this came from.
So we had OMMs going years back, but it was only like maybe 3 years ago, 4 years ago, we added the emotions because we saw in early learning preschools, this is what they do. So my daughter's Olivia, you're seeing her stick. These are 3-year-olds coming to class and they're given a stick when they walk in. Drop your emotion stick on how you feel. Excited, angry, sad, happy, right? It's kind of put out there. And so, as I took my daughter to school, so she's 6 now, but when she was 3, I was like, you know how she feels. Today, she's feeling really scared. And I would see her go into the class, but drop the stick almost consistently in either happy, excited, like all the positive emotions. And the teachers, kind of leading by example, dropped their stick in first. Their stick was always on the positive side as well. And so, their training
kids that's good and right. the negative is bad.
So me being kind of a experimenter, like as I sat there waiting for the class to open, I'm talking to Olivia's friends, right? I'm talking to like Leah, I'm talking to a bunch of other of her friends, and I'm asking how they're doing, and they're really angry today, right? And they've been crying and they're upset. So then I walk in the class and I watch where Leah's putting her stick and she puts it in happy. And I was like, Leah, you're angry, right? You put it in the wrong one. And so I literally started telling this 3-year-old, there's a one for angry. You need to put your stick here. That's where how you feel. And she starts to look at me and literally tells me, basically the 3-year-old signal for shut up, grown up, get out of here, shut up. You're going to get me in trouble. You're going to get me in trouble. And it's crazy how quickly the kids picked up what's right and what's wrong. And I look over to the right, and this was the poster that was there. How to change our feelings. If you're feeling sad, I'm going to get you happy really quick. We either need a hug, right? Or if you're feeling angry, right? Take a drink, right? Take a break, take a deep breath. If you're worried, right? And this idea, and so we worked with some schools to say, instead of saying, how do we change our feelings? How do we honor our feelings? How do we acknowledge that this is real?
And it's giving you a signal.
That we have both good emotions and bad emotions, and that's real. I think one person we might come and get speaking in one of our COAs is Susan Cain. She got famous for the power of quiet introvert work, but her latest work is all around joy and sorrow, and that to be human, it's to have both. That if you don't actually have both joy and sorrow, you're not being human. And so here's what we found interesting. So we've been using for the last 3 years, individuals in the company, and we've also outside organizations have been testing this On My Mind app. And it's interesting, besides email, what technology does. This is the accumulation for Nyan of his emotions, his green emotions versus his red emotions, mapped over time. And what we found was this. We found that most of us think, if I'm an optimist, my emotions must generally all be green, right? very little red. If I'm a pessimist, it must generally be mostly, maybe 80, 90% red, very few green. The reality is over time, right? Because we all have very bad memories of what happens to us. Over time, it was almost all 50-50. And the difference between an optimist and a pessimist was literally 2 to 3, 4 percentage points. The optimist just had literally 2 to 4 percentage points more green over time, and the pessimist has 2 to 4 percentage more red over time. And simply knowing and seeing that that's okay, the days I feel really crappy, the days I feel really scared, that's normal.
Yeah.
And that means over time, I will have days I feel the opposite. And it was almost a shocker for people to see the own emotions they picked and looking at it over 90 days to see that, wait a second, like I'm not 80, 90 red, I'm not 80, 90 green.
I want to get to the toughness. Okay. Yeah. So we're going to get to, so that was daily summary, OMMs.
Should we take questions?
We could take a few quick questions. I know we're seeing some, we're trying to answer some through the chat. We could, if you raise your hand, and maybe Daryl could help us if there is a burning question, but then we have about 5 more minutes. We wanted to take you through the toughness training and how to use 90 days to actually make stuff happen.
So how about this? If you go in your chat, you can just punch in, right? Maybe give you like 15 seconds. Anyone have a question? Then we'll take a look what's popping up in.
Why don't you get the calendar up
Okay.
again? Well, we're gonna just set up for the next piece. We have about 5. We might run over 5 minutes.
Let's see. If there's no, let's see.
Okay, how do you deal with someone who?
Okay, so from iPhone to everyone, I don't know who iPhone is, but it said,
how do you deal with someone who
keeps having negative feedback. Now, negative feedback is different than them having negative emotions, right? So this is the act of actually receiving a lot of critical feedback, right? I don't know for the iPhone person.
Probably mean negative emotions where somebody is so negative and it just keeps staying negative. That must be more what you mean.
So whoever's iPhone to everyone, can you just unmute and just ask the question?
Clarify.
So I know Sanjeev is asking.
Hi, my name is Priscilla. So I'm actually one of the coaches for our corporate business. And I keep having one analyst who, I try to be very empathetic. I try to be there for them. I try not to micromanage as much, but I feel like every time that I coach her on her defects, I get a bad reaction as to, I'm doing things right versus it's not really, the proper way we should be doing the things. So I just wanted to know, what kind of steps or what can we do to help, someone who is struggling but doesn't necessarily take the coaching 360.
We covered some of this last week, but maybe just to quickly give you a few, if you look at the last week's class, we talked about the notion of a few tips of how to do this. One is shoulder to shoulder, which now I think you can't really sit across eye to eye, but even over Zoom can be eye to eye. The idea of shoulder to shoulder, as in you're not looking directly at them, it's very difficult for them to receive and for you to give really critical feedback eye to eye. You can get there, but I think if this person's having a hard time with that, sometimes by not looking directly at them and letting them process, but also this notion of we call it LBR. So it stands for bring it to light, take a break, and then revisit. Bringing it to light, you're sharing something that's very difficult for this person to receive. And I think when we try to kind of force that information in and then say process it and then accept it all in the same session is very difficult. So this notion of bring it to light, share the information, and then a break. Mm-hmm. Go to the bathroom, take a walk for a second. Just let that person absorb what you just said. They start to hear it differently when you come back and revisit. So it literally might be, I want to share something with you, and then take a break, even if it's 5 minutes or a few minutes, come back and revisit it. Again, we shared this last week in detail.
And so the one other piece I would add is this, doing it in teams. Meaning as in developing in teams is a lot easier and is a lot more effective than developing solo. And solo is that kind of one-to-one coach to individual. I think the hardest thing for children oftentimes is someone who's just older, wiser, maybe not wiser, but at least older with more experience, kind of finger wagging and teaching them everything. They found in some of the best, sort of the educator of educators like Harvard and Stanford and whatnot, that people learn a lot faster experiencing it together with others in the arena, meaning you need to be with others in the struggle. And so this is the part of even getting, you know, like if you are coaching this person, I know there's got to be at least one other person in the organization struggling with some of their feedback they're getting, right? Performance feedback. When you have the two of them sit together and share with each other, right, what that feedback is and how they're processing what they're struggling with it, the act of not feeling alone is literally 50% of the solution. Feeling like I am the only one, right? Think of how awful it's usually done. You close the door, you make sure no one can see, you bring them in, maybe even after hours when everyone's gone, and you sit them down to give them like basically all these issues and challenges they have, you want them to fix. Versus like when you put them together, the first session literally focuses on them just talking about this seems unfair, this and that. And then as they hear themselves in their colleagues and teammates, right? In research, they call this the proximal zone of development. People in tight ranges struggling with similar things can actually learn from each other faster. Every now and then you need someone with many levels up experience to help guide if they're going the wrong direction. But the first part is not about right or wrong. It's about not feeling alone. So
Okay.
we'll cover more of this,
Awesome.
but I know
Thank you.
time is running out. So I'm going to show you, give me 1 second. Let me broadcast this again. These hours are so short for us. So like for us, and I could speak for like hours, but I'm not sure you want to listen to me for hours. But so I am going to take you through this really fast on toughness. Today is April 23rd. So I just took a picture of the calendar. And the first thing I'm going to walk you through is this. Human beings, they operate in increments of 13 weeks, which is approximately 90 days. So when you want to accomplish anything, when you want to go and actually play offense, I want you to think of accomplishment of anything you want to do in 13 weeks, as opposed to within this week, within this day, within like even this year is too far. 3 different phases of this. So the first phase of the 13 weeks, so this is 4 weeks, is what they call the negative return on investment. In sports, they call this the adaptation phase. The adaptation phase means that like, despite you actually trying hard, you're going to get negative results. Have you ever gone on a diet and actually started gaining weight? You're like, I don't get it. I'm like, I cut out all this stuff I want to eat, and I'm now eating kale and drinking lemon water as opposed to these sodas and juices I love, and you're gaining weight. And you're like, I don't get it, right? That phase can last up to 4 weeks. Phase 2 is the phase, 4 weeks again. It's where you get the first signals of success. And the first signals of success, and we'll cover this in one of the future sessions, is what we call baby metrics versus adult metrics. It's a visceral, like, you know, when you start dieting, suddenly you're like, wait, these pants feel looser. You walk around and someone's like, hey, Charlie, did you lose weight? And you're getting these first signals of success. And the mistake we tend to make is we stop our ritual and our investment there. Phase 3 is 5 weeks. And this is, by the way, where you get the positive ROI. And so they have these 3 different phases. And the hardest phase to get by and do the right things is phase 1. And the reason why it's hard is because the energy we invest, right? You're going on a diet, you're pushing hard, does not have a return. And oftentimes it is a negative return. And so I'm going to look at these phases, right? So phase 1 being yellow, then phase 2 in green, and phase 3 in blue. So I'm gonna bound it this way. So since it's the 23rd, which by the way, I'm hoping the first work from home protocols, the daily summary OMM, I'm hoping even by tomorrow you can go and try it. I encourage you, even if it's just with 5 people, 10 people, just try it and see what happens after you try it 3 times. This is bigger. This is toughness. This is going after really playing offense. Oops. So this one, I'm going to assume that you are not going to start this till, say, beginning of May. Now, I'm going to look 6 months out, which goes till October.
Okay, 6 months, yeah.
Right? And this is kind of going back to that Stockdale paradox, where I'm going to go out here. And so first, sorry, give me
Meaning
1
we're
second.
planning for a 6-month window of work from home versus thinking in 2 weeks. Nope, not 2 weeks. In another 2 weeks. Now it's going to be closed for another 2. Operate assuming 6 months. A lot of different data points would indicate that that could be true. And if it could be less than that, fantastic. If it's more than that, at least you're planning long term. But the notion is to plan at least 6 months out. So you start to do the right things for the long run, as opposed to every few weeks or every week focusing more on short-term gain, short-term return.
So July 31 is the date I want you to think, I'm going to accomplish something great, something big. It could be personal. It could be as a team. It could end up being something that you do as an entire enterprise. But July 31, 90 days out, 13 weeks is how you think about. Phase 1 is the yellow phase. Then you have the green phase. Then you have the blue phase. And why these phases are important, and Megan mentioned this notion of a gated process. Based on what you accomplish in phase 1, in the yellow part, it will change your options and choices as you head to the green part. Based on what you accomplish in the green zone, it will change the options and choices for what you can accomplish in the blue zone. And one of the things that's important that I want you to think about is this. I'm going to put a lot of red over here, right? So this is looking out. And if you're wondering, right, when is this coronavirus work from home stuff going to end? I want you to think nothing's going to change for 6 months out. Now, why 6 months? We have one of Google's top board members, this guy Ram Shriram, whose biggest investment actually is in NextJump. And he shared with us the Google founders, even today, but from the very beginning, would never plan beyond 6 months. Their view was that in today's day and age, it's not realistic looking beyond 6 months. It's not in what they call the visible future. So yes, we spend some time making long-range planning of, I want to accomplish in 10 years, 5 years, maybe even in a year. But their point was, at some point, your return on all the assumptions and investments you make, you're literally making up way too much. So instead, within 6 months, that's your visible zone. And remember the Stockdale paradox. This situation, I know, Georgia, you might go back to work, or everything might open by Friday. Instead, I want you to operate and think, this is going to stay exactly the way it is till end of October, 6 months out. Now, I'm not telling you that to be negative and be a pessimist, but it's the idea, if you operate with a long game plan, you're more likely to do the right things. If you think this thing is going to be over in 2 weeks, you're going to operate very differently with a short game mindset and look to say, I'm just going to suffer through this now and then I'll be fine. And that's the heartbreak that led to the Stockdale paradox of people through heartbreak dying. Literally, your body gives out as you give up. So that notion of, I'm going to get prepared for 6 months. But now within the 6 months, I'm going to spend my time focusing heavily on what is going to be in 3 different phases. So I'm going to make these 90-day sprints, these 13-week sprints. And what's going to end up happening in the very beginning phase, right? Phase 0 is what we called phase 1, the negative ROI. This phase, and I think we're out of time here, but we will spend more time in future sessions, is what we call the investment in loss phase. It's a phase where you are going to go and experiment. The term we use internally is called EE. Explore the edges. Don't play safe. Try things in the extreme. Next week, we have a speaker coming in. He's a TED Talk speaker who did this exercise of trying to get rejection 100 days in a row. 100 days of rejection. It's a TED Talk speaker named Jia Jiang. It's awesome what he found.
Because he feared rejection.
He feared rejection.
Went into 100-day, every day, coming up with a new way to get told no.
And what he found was that going for 100 no's, he did the craziest stuff. You can't imagine what he went after, because he deliberately went after trying to get a no, a rejection. He got more yeses than you can imagine, and he surprised himself. And he realized that there's a notion of fear and danger, right? What is in your head versus what is real. Real danger is dangerous. Perceived danger is oftentimes in our head. Fear of failure is something that is in our head, and we can't distinguish that. So building the window where you're going to experiment, you're going to put your lab coat and a scientist hat on, and you're not going to be scared of actually face planning falling short because you want to invest in loss, invest in experimenting in the early phase. Most people wait and wait and wait. And as you see that I'm not going to accomplish something great by July 31st, now you start going and swinging for the fences. And that act of desperation is how most things go wrong. So these three phases kind of become very important in how we map this out.
So we will teach this, right? Next week, I think we're trying to go into more detail on this. So gives you a week to think about this, right? And then any questions I don't think we have time now, but if you, maybe Daryl will hand it off to you to give feedback. Feedback will help us hear what's on your mind.
Yeah, so how about this? Daryl, can we maybe add a little feedback, which helps us a little bit from the group, and then we'll stay on for a little bit. I don't know, Daryl, can we stay on this line?
We can, Charlie, Megan, if you're available, I can leave the room open for a little bit.
Okay, so we'll be on for maybe 15 minutes more after this.
I didn't know. Okay.
Till 12:15, we can answer more questions. But Daryl, you want to do the feedback real quick so we can get?
Sounds good, Charlie. Well, so thank you all for participating and for your engagement. As Charlie and Megan mentioned, we run our Community Online Academy each week, and we want to make it better each time. So to do that, we'd like to get your feedback for both Charlie and Megan, but also for me as the moderator. So what I'd like to do is please, if you haven't pulled up your app on your phone, hopefully you've downloaded it. Please go ahead and pull it up. And I've got a short video, little tutorial on how to use the app for those of you that aren't familiar with the app. So if you'll bear with me, I'll pull that up, show that to you, and then I would like to get your feedback. Did everyone see my screen?
Daryl, you might need to narrate since I think the sound is off.
Yeah, the sound is off. Assuming everybody's not hearing the narration. So if you haven't used the feedback app before, it's just trying to narrate you through, but there is volume. It's not working.
Now, what we have done, and I think what we have done in this window of COVID is we have seen the need. There's so much organizational silence. The feedback app allowed you to get a real, I mean, in 2 minutes, you can see what everyone's thinking and saying. And so it's anonymous, but it's transparent. So whatever you write, no one will know you wrote it, but you can read what everyone wrote to whoever you gave it to. It's the equivalent of if you ever watch X-Men, being Professor Xavier and being able to read everyone's minds almost instantly. So it helps us understand what people took away, what was confusing, what they want more of. And then you can go and see what other people said and up and downvote it as well. So I know that was a pretty quick. All right, so how about this?
We understand if you have to go. We'll stay on for another 10, 15 minutes. If there's questions, maybe put it into the chat and we'll just call on you to ask the question. Is that good?
Give them a few seconds to do your feedback, but
yeah.
Bethany, do you mind if I unmute you and have you ask that question? Sorry, let's see if I can unmute you.
Sorry, let us just try to unmute. It still looks muted.
Or actually, Bethany, can you unmute yourself and ask?
Can you hear me?
Yes.
Great, thank you. Thank you so much for doing this. I've been to 2 leadership academies and they've been wonderful from the school standpoint. And I'm thinking about investment in loss with elementary school kids and thinking about planning 6 months out. Boston Public Schools just Tuesday announced that we're not opening again until September or whenever. And so I wonder what the spin is in terms of this for schools. I know it's very different than businesses.
So
Yeah.
can I take a quick shot? And so Bethany, tell me if this is maybe going the wrong direction. The first thought I have is this. We got this from the head of medical when coronavirus started spreading from one of the Air Force bases, Eielson. And he was saying large institutions are less flexible. They have a lot of just rigid rules, and their inability to innovate is going to be very, big, right? So when I think of something really difficult, the first thought I have is creating a laboratory. I need a place to rapidly experiment and ramp up what is happening. And so when I think about a laboratory, for example, you're gonna, have to say whether it's elementary school or not, wouldn't it be great before you have to deliver? If you had a laboratory, that you can ramp up the level of stress, right? But you can figure out a way to test your extreme ideas and theories.
Yeah.
The ideas of, do you try large groups, small group, do you try this, do you try that? And just the ability to set up this ramp, it's what we call a gated process. The way the 90-day thing is built is a gated process. Based on what happens in the first gate, 4 weeks, it changes what you do in the next 4 weeks. You will stop doing the things that don't work, but you will keep doing more of what does work, right? And this idea of building an experimenter's mindset as opposed to this notion of I have to sit back and think of what's right and then just declare it and launch it. That would be one of the worst ways to, like, software is never built this way. They always say launch quickly, then iterate like hell. You need to be able to launch quickly, then iterate like hell. But to iterate like hell, you need to build your petri dishes so that you have the ability to test different theories and hypotheses. And then as you share it, you'll be surprised how you might find others that start to put a lab coat on and start to experiment. And then the collective knowledge learned from these experiments will further shape how you keep experimenting. And by the time you have to actually have school open, you will have some of the most innovative ways you could be teaching.
I think obviously if the school system recognizes it, it's not going to come. And ideally, it comes back in September. Everybody goes back to school in September, but it may not be. But to even use May and June would be amazing. To even use the month of May or even a week of May, when the kids are in school now, to experiment, because a lot of kids just can't keep up with what's happening anyway. So I feel like it's like a natural zone to experiment. But what we're seeing anyways, at least for the kids and our kids are in school, it's the opposite. It's just still trying to do the same thing, get the same amount of output. And it's like a very different situation. It's an amazing opportunity, I think, to experiment, but that's not what we're seeing, unfortunately.
Sanjeev, you had a question? You want to unmute yourself and ask? Is Sanjeev still here?
Sanjeev, are you here? If not, we'll
If not, let's
go
see.
different. Oh, this is a long one. Okay.
We have a long question from Kevin. Who's Kevin? Do you want to unmute and? I'm reading the question. Let's see.
Yeah. How are
Kevin, if you're in here, can you just unmute and ask so everyone can hear the question?
Or how about this? Since let's see, we have 6. If you do have a question, since we want to make sure we're answering people who are here, if you want to raise your hand, let us just scroll through, see if we can. Anyone want to?
Hello, can you hear me?
Oh, there
Yeah,
you go,
good.
Kevin. Go ahead.
Hi. Yeah, so I was just trying to address different scenarios that we would be faced with. And, for someone who has never worked from home and who usually would use home as, I would say use work as a way to sort of escape some issues that were going on at home, they're now confronted with that while trying to be productive. And I was just wondering, what do you guys believe is the best way to sort of address that person individually and obviously keep some privacy?
Yeah.
But then to bring them into the fold with the team.
So, Kevin, if you're interested, my email is just charlie@nextjump.com. Just shoot me a note if you want afterwards. I had an exact conversation tied to this with one of the heads of a charter school this past week. Was asking the question where he's got a AP chemistry teacher who the spouse is an essential worker. They have 3 kids, including a 1-year-old, right? I mean, like, and they're falling behind and not being able to do the curriculum, and I mean, just a collision of just a lot, right?
Right.
What do you do? How do you help them? And so there's 3 parts of how I answered just when they sent the note. One was the first part, once again, is to make them not feel alone. This notion of like the worst is when the individual believes they're the only one dealing with this, because you know the problem with Facebook is that everyone projects the fake us. They did a research on looking at the data on Facebook versus Google, and when you look at the horrible things people search and look for, it's just awful, right? Like versus like Facebook's like, you know, my husband is amazing, my children are so smart, and then they looked at the same people on Google. They're like, is what's wrong with my husband? Are my children like, you know, broken? I mean, like the same people in your own privacy, you're Google searching a very different set of questions than what you're projecting out there. And so the notion of finding, like, it's awful if you're struggling like this and then you're paired with someone who is like, you know, 22 at home and thinking like, it's been great. You know, I'm binge watching Netflix. Right. It's been like quiet time. I'm trying to write a book. Like it's just been wonderful. Right. And there are these polarizing cases.
I'm learning a new language. I'm learning a new instrument. Like, oh my God. Pull my hair out.
So putting, even if it's 2, it's amazing. The minute it's 2, it's a team. And we always say when it's a team problem, it becomes an enterprise problem. When it's a solo problem, it's usually your problem. And so to find a way to put them together. And for them to realize that it's more than one person on the team struggling with this. This is a team problem. It's an enterprise problem. That's one of the first ways where it doesn't solve it. But I can't tell you, like a lot of challenges with problems, you can't underestimate the damage of the self-inflicted additions on top of the actual problem.
And Kevin, I've noticed that some of the people in our organization who I would consider less vulnerable, which I think people hate that word, but less likely to share some of those things. The place that they will share it is actually through the OMM, the On My Mind we shared, because it's almost like that's the place to share some of this stuff. And I think especially for those individuals, it'll come up as the third thing. It's sort of like, by the way, I don't know if anybody else is struggling with this, but you know, I feel guilty. I'm working and my wife has a part-time job, but she's taking care of our 2 children and trying to educate them. And I feel, you know, it's like they'll bring up all those sorts of things in and On My Mind usually. It's because it's much harder to do it face to face. You know, you don't want to look like you can't handle it. So I have found in our company, and we, you know, I model vulnerability and sharing problems and challenges, and I still struggle with this. It's hard. My husband works full time. He's at home trying to teach 2 kids. It's really hard, and it's not working, right? And it's a struggle. But even for me, if it's a struggle, I found recently, more than ever, those people, which is a lot of people who struggle with that, will share it in the OMM. And it doesn't mean they have to go address it with their spouse or their family right away, but they get a place to talk about it and think about it. And they might even then get back to work sharing at home, because work is now at home, talking to their spouse about it because they got a little perspective.
The accumulation of negative emotions we hold in is literally toxin. It is toxin that poisons our system. And the act of just literally talking about it to another human being, ideally who's also in the arena, that can literally make it that much better. And we say it moves from a 51% issue, which is the majority,
To 49.
it dials it to 49.
It's only 2% difference, but you can kind of operate at that with that change.
Aqua, you had a great question here. Can you unmute and ask? And then Sanjeev, I know you were trying to, so while Aqua's unmuting, I'll just answer Sanjeev's question really quick. The daily summary is in OMMs. So the hardest part, right, as a leader, as a manager, to get your people to do this and just observe. Do not get reactive. We are so wired and built to be knee-jerk reactive managers, knee-jerk reactive parents, that just giving the space of silence and letting them process the ritual of writing a daily summary, writing 3 times a week an OMM. And what you'll see as a leader and a manager is the value you will bring comes in the accumulation of patterns and trends you see. you start to see someone's OMM go progressively more negative or progressively more positive or progressively inauthentic, which actually probably is the most common thing that's going to show up. And then where we interject as a leader is to ask them, hey, can you just be a little more authentic, or can you be more specific? Or you can interject before it gets bad, or you can interject before they get reckless. But you need to be able to see patterns and create that space. So Sanjeev, maybe if that helps answer. Aqua, you want to ask your question if you're in here? I think it's Aqua or AKUA, whoever that is.
Yes, this is Aquia.
Yes,
Aquia, go ahead.
Aquia.
Okay, so at my company, you know, as an individual contributor, we often have to ask manager approval to do a lot of things. And my issue is anytime I ask for feedback from my manager, it's usually just, oh yeah, you're doing great, but there's nothing after that. There's no in-depth feedback. And I was wondering how to get around that to actually grow within the company that I'm in.
It's actually a great question. So we were going to cover this in one of our future series, which is in research, they call it feedback seeking, right? There's a skill of, feedback receiving and processing that feedback well.
Yeah.
There's a skill of feedback giving. There's feedback seeking. How do you build skills to get better feedback, right? Because oftentimes the most common thing we get is exactly what you mentioned, which is a kind of mediocre or what we call a low calorie, reaction, a low calorie feedback, kind of like doesn't do anything. And so what's interesting is people who learn the skills of being good feedback seekers recognize there's two things you need to do to get a lot of feedback. One is declare a big and ambitious goal, right? Remember the Babe Ruth when he goes up and points to the bleachers? When you point to the bleachers before you go and act, right? If you say in 90 days, I'm going to accomplish this big ambitious goal, whether it's personally or for the organization, now you're going to get more critical feedback, more constructive feedback, more, people like judging, right? More meaty feedback. The second part then, part I mentioned at the beginning, the first 4 weeks, the investment in loss phase, if you go and expose and make transparent the experiments you're running, kind of like Bethany in the public schools. Yeah. Imagine if she says, right, 90 days out, I am going to figure out the new model of education for elementary schools. Literally, I'm going to figure out what the world doesn't know right now. I'm going to figure it out in 90 days, right? Now that's scary to do, but 90 days. And then the first 4 weeks, as she experiments and she starts to expose and make transparent what's happening, you're going to get a lot of reaction. You're going to get a lot of feedback, right? Now, of course, we all know people who tend to kind of whisper sweet nothings back to us, right? Which is what we call our echo chamber of BS. The people who are like, yeah, oh, Charlie, you're amazing. Yeah. You thought that was a bad presentation? I thought that was one of your best, right? It's better than most people. Come on. So we have those people. But then those who are always snarky. No matter what you do, they find fault in what you're doing. Well, if you want to get better, right? And if you've declared a big goal and you're experimenting in the 4 weeks, you want to know what you're not seeing. What's in your blind spot?
And the piece before all this, you'd be surprised, we call it the dial down. There are things that everybody does this, we don't realize we're doing it, is we do things that make it harder for others to tell us the truth. So if you are doing things that are out of comfort zone and you feel you deserve a reaction, feedback, critical feedback on that, they might feel that you're hostile. They might feel you're fragile. They might feel you put out a scent that you actually don't really want to hear the truth. What you really want to hear is good things, right? That's possible too. There's crutch phrases. I'm doing my best here. Or I stayed up all night doing this. I'd like to get your feedback, right? I'm really proud of this work. Can you give me some feedback? Well, you're not going to get critical feedback when you do that. So, so that's a resiliency training program we ran, and all these videos are up. But yeah, you can dial some of those things down, saying,
you can have the reverse crutch phrases. You can say I know I'm not going to want to hear this, but just tell me, right? Can you just tell me what you're really thinking, right?
Yeah. I'm sure that's going to be hard for me to hear, but I want you to tell me, right? You can make it a lot easier.
Like if you say just pretend I'm the smartest person in the world. Yeah. Now, can you just rip me to shreds? Go ahead, tell me the truth. You can do these things to draw out. That braces yourself,
so you brace for impact yourself.
And gives the other person permission to be more honest and more visceral. I'll leave you with this one thing I have on our wall, which I love for a while. There's a woman we met at the CIA that we love. She said this. She said that she's observed time and time again, if you build a polished prototype, others will see flaws. But if you build a rough prototype, they will see potential. They will make suggestions rather than shoot the idea down. And why I share that is that in that 13-week window, that phase one is your window to build your rough prototypes and to expose it in its messy form, not PowerPointed, not in a glossy, color printed thing, but like literally it's your scribbles and messes, but it's going for something big and bold you're trying to accomplish. You're going to get a lot more reaction. Versus what we like to do is the whole the Big Bang sort of surprise. Yeah. You save it up. I don't want to show it to you until it's ready. I don't want to show it to you until it's ready, right? So you're working and working and working, and after 90 days, you're like, ta-da, what do you think? I have the solution to fix elementary education in all schools. Yeah. And most people won't tell you the truth, right?
Because you look like you don't want to hear it, right? Because you just spent 3 months building it.
But trust me, behind your back, they'll say, that's the dumbest thing I've ever seen, right? Or like that they did not think about this, they did not think about that. Yeah. It just gets really ugly fast. Whether it's to your face and most often behind your back. So the point of getting that reaction, getting that feedback, getting sort of other team members' point of view is if you get it the right way, it's like puzzle pieces. They're holding on to pieces of the puzzle that you do not have, that is in your blind spot. And if they contribute that puzzle piece, it is that much faster for you to accomplish what you need to get done. So we will leave you with that. I put in the chat our emails, if you didn't see it. Right, Charlie at Next Jump and Megan at Next Jump, please reach out to us. We were saying, as lonely as this,
Chris is doing that.
Right, as lonely as this whole COVID window has been for us, despite all the stress, we found community and just faces that we're seeing. We feel closer with all you guys. Just seeing you guys coming back in, guys and gals, right? Yeah. So from us, from the bottom of our hearts, thank you for helping us feel community in these tough times.